useful information for them that they can go and grab them. So there are a lot of applications like that are being developed.
I've read a little bit about the subject, and I've seen, I think it was somewhere in Europe, they're trying to come up with an application where they would make life easier for handicapped people on wheelchairs so they can use transportation in an easier way. That was one example. The other thing I read was smaller communities being smart and then eventually integrating all those small communities into a larger scale smart city and different silos, transportation, traffic, and things that you have mentioned here. And I guess the way things or this technology will impact the end user will be how much the user is willing to allow or adopt this technology, starting from automating their home and then going from there, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the adoption. I mean, like I don't know how many people here have Alexa or Google Home at home. You know, that crept on us, and you know we have them at home, and you know I don't use it as much as probably a lot of other people do. So I think you will have multitude of people. Not everyone uses a phone. Not everyone even uses a smartphone, and not everyone uses it to the same scale. Like my kids probably use it for different reasons than what I use it for. I mostly use it for very business purposes. They use it for social stuff, right? So I think like a lot of those applications, how they're utilized, how they're used is going to evolve over time. Yeah.
So I know the city of Calgary has an open data thing where they actually invite people to come in and look at their data and make applications and bring in new ideas on what to do with that data.
Okay, so I wasn't aware of that. That's great.
Yeah,
Actually, that's one of the things I thought about utilities need to do that.
They
Okay.
have hackathons and things like that, which is where some of these apps actually came from.
Okay.
Where they basically say, yes, we have this data, what should we do with it? And that's how they're trying to engage and make that a smarter platform.
Because a lot of this is data driven, right? So anybody who's got data, they need to figure out how to use that data to make more meaningful use out of it. Yeah.
But I have my data. How do I make money out of my data? Why is Google making all the money out of me? Why aren't I making any money out of my data?
Well, are you or are you not by letting go of some of your data? Are you are getting some return back?
I suggest I didn't let it go. It was stolen from me.
Sure.
I'm making money out of it.
Yeah.
So how come
until you give it up?
No, I think the point there was valid. I mean, I think right now the technology companies have a bit of a free rein because it's hard for the governments to regulate them at a time where that is the innovation that is differentiating certain countries and creating employment. So it's really hard for them to temper that enthusiasm and that creativity. But I think they're getting very, very rich over that path. I mean, Google and Apple are very Amazon. I mean, they're very rich. So I think at some point in time, regulations is going to come. I don't think it's going to happen now because right now you're in the race, right? And but at some point in time, it will need to happen because issues like that, where you can't just have few companies continue to accumulate wealth, right? I mean, it's no different than back in the oil and gas came or when the utilities came. Those were the big money makers, right? And they eventually got regulated because they were making too much money and they had too much control. And so I think same thing will happen here, but yeah.
How do we inspire public trust in all of a lot of these functions? Because ultimately, it seems like there's room to come in and regulate a lot of these things, but that never happens ultimately. But as engineers, I feel like society trusts everyone in this room to a certain extent because they give a lot of power. A lot of power is given over, but a lot is expected in return. There's an ethics in what goes on here. But a company like Google or Apple is allowed to be amoral. There's no morality in what they do because why should they care? Like their goal is profit, so why? It's not their problem.
No, but
if
that's
they take
immorality.
That's not amorality.
That's their justification.
Yeah,
They're
well,
making money.
Yeah, but ultimately, a company like Apple is allowed to go, well, yeah, my shareholders want profit, so why should I care? about the ultimate goal. So how do you inspire trust in people if people believe that, well, ultimately companies get to be amoral? Like, I can trust the engineers in there, but they don't run everything. There are a lot more powerful executives above them who make decisions that can change my life in disastrous ways.
Do you guys remember AT&T, or no, Bell, when it was broken, when it was divested?
Yeah.
Right?
Not in Canada.
That was the U.S. The trust busting, FDR trust bust, I think.
No,
Yeah, it was
AT&T and the baby bells and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the States, that wasn't Canada.
Right, but,
It didn't affect us here.
yeah, but I'm talking in the context that there was a company, example of a company that was very large.
They had to sell off Northern Telecom. Northern Telecom
And,
was part of the same
and
thing.
regulations came in and decided to divest it. I mean, it was a little bit different in Canada because we never really had a monopoly like that.
Sure we did. We had more monopolistic practice in Canada than in the States.
Yeah.
It was a regulated monopoly.
And I think the other thing is that a lot of these companies, as mature as it seems, we're still in a very infant stage. It's no different than a little toddler when the toddler, it's like my 2-year-old, right? He wants to do things recklessly. He wants to beat his sisters because he thinks he can get away with it. He wants to throw toys. So I think that's a stage where we're in with a lot of these companies that they don't really know what they're trying to push limits, and in some cases they run into problems when they do what they're not supposed to do, and a lot of it is going to be a feedback loop for them, and if they don't behave, which I think a lot of them are probably not going to, because greed generally overtakes when you have control, they probably will be divested. In fact, there's already talks about divesting Amazon, breaking Amazon into smaller companies. I just read an article of that just last week. So you're starting to hear some of these voices, and I've also read similar things about Google, that Google has gotten too much control. Yep.
Yeah, I said, one observation, I mean, come down to is the cost. So last year I was in China. And in a major city, most of the people are paid by using the phone. And I heard about that, I haven't seen that yet. Some of the small shop, the local shop, for the local people, they don't accept cash. Because the reason for that is, for all the resources, counting the money, depositing, whatever, okay, it costs you more than just pay that very minimal transaction fee. But they do have an advantage, they got so big a volume, so the transaction fee is so small that it's transparent to the user. Okay. Now that is really blowing my mind. I think that let's see that in some other country first, no, but I was in China now. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I did see even a student, I get in a taxi, when I get out, he just pay by the phone.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff that's going on, I was chatting earlier with Jose here, like what's going on in Hangzhou City in China. I don't know if you guys have read up on it. I mean, it's analytics to a whole different level, right?
Oh yeah. And for the facial recognition.
Yeah, the facial recognition, they
Yes.
recognize everybody out there. The traffic monitor I talked about, they're all implementing that. So
Yeah, they got so much cameras. And so I used to go to cruise, you go to cruise and take a picture and then you go to the photo gallery, you buy the pictures, eh? But this time I was in China for the cruise, it's different. They don't have a photo gallery.
but you know what? I mean, that's actually a good example. So so they have actually taken a lot of that privacy away from people. already.
Yeah.
In Hangzhou City, like they've got cameras, they've got facial recognizing. If somebody violates a traffic, they've got like a social recognition system, like a credit system, where if somebody's picking up a garbage, they give them plus automatically. The system gives them plus, and if somebody's doing something bad or parking wrong way, whatever, they're giving minus. So, so they have that city, the residents of that city have decided to give up a lot of that freedom, but it's gotten very, very safe. You don't have a lot of crime in that city. Things work at a different level. So people who live there, I guess have decided, and I'm not sure, maybe it wasn't a choice in China. The individual cities are very different. So,
No cash.
but yeah, so I mean, it's a different, obviously, policy mechanism on how those things are enabled. But could that be a value proposition for some people to say that, okay, if that makes my city, make me feel safer, and maybe cost some of these transactions will cost less, maybe I'm willing to make that trade.
But the cost isn't something that affects you, like, there's nobody pointing a gun at you. But you look at those situations, and there's winners, and
There's
most
losers.
people are losers.
I mean, we have the choice, you don't have to use phones.
We have the choice,
Yeah, we have the choice,
but other places don't. We have the choice to speak up.
sure.
Other places you can't.
Yeah, we really don't have a choice. I'm not going to be able to function in this society if I don't use my phone. It's like you're saying you have a choice. You don't have to have a car in Calgary.
No, you can
can't
opt
get
out.
anywhere, right?
You can go live in a cave.
And yeah, so it's I think
So those are the transactions, those are the choices that we make, was my point.
I think we are reaching a point that it's not choice. We are going in that direction. We want to go there, but I think we are all upset that a whole bunch of people are abusing it.
Sure.
And they're making not thousands, not millions, but billions and trillions of dollars on something that they just happen to have. Nobody gave them the right. The issue we are seeing is, I raised 2 boys, and you give them cell phone when they're teenagers, and with a click a button they can go to any website they want. You put regulation to prevent them, and I think all I'm hearing tonight is we need regulation. But I'm just thinking, we are adopting new technologies that require certain level of maturity of society.
Yeah.
And when our leaders are not living up to it, when governments are not living up to it, the whole system is based on greed and making money. There's no way you can put all the regulations in the world to stop this. There's no way you can stop it, right? So if you can have education, you can have maturity, you can have ethics, and you can put regulations, it gets out of hand. And I think that's what we are observing. You're observing a society that there is no way you could put enough regulation. And if you put regulations, technology is going faster than you can come up with regulations, right? Like we know European communities are coming up with very stiff regulations for these things. But by the time it's in place and we are adapting it, there are a whole bunch of new technologies coming in that it goes around. Yeah. So we are finding ourselves helpless. I think that's where the challenge is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is do you guys remember when Facebook initially came? It was considered a taboo, it's not a really good thing, but now it's become normal because it's like candy, right? Whenever something new comes, people tend to overdose on it or abuse it. It's like chocolate, right? Giving it to a kid, and then after a while, you learn. So there's got to be somewhere along the way. There's got to be a balance between. Right now, people don't have a choice, or they're sticking to the new candy that's given to us. But eventually, I think that's how this thing is such at a scale that it's going to transform cultures, even our value systems, even our ethics systems. Like if you look at Japanese and Korean culture, the reason their work ethic is crazy. Like those people have to work 10, 12 hours a day, and it's expected from them. It's not a regulation; it's a cultural thing. That so a lot of these things that our culture that we know it today is based on may not be able to address, and so maybe some of those leaders, and that may not necessarily be government leaders, it might be religious, might be community leaders, might be somebody else who's going to raise some of these issues, and people are going to gravitate to that new way of thinking. I don't know what that is, but I think this is going to be transformative. Whatever happens, it's going to change us more than just this, and more than giving this role. I think it's going to change our behavior as well. How we trust our families, how we working on family unit. There's going to be a lot of changes that are coming. Yep.
I got a question that kind of goes in totally different directions. I don't know if people don't like it, just say it, but I'm actually much more interested, especially here at the session tonight, in the grid and what some of the things that have been happening on the grid, because I'm an IEEE member, but I'm not an electrical engineer. And I find it really fascinating, some of the struggles that people have had. And you've mentioned some of the things. So Kumar Venayagamurthy down in Clemson University, was at University of Missouri Rolla, worked with Ron Harley at Florida, and building a smart grid prototype concept based mostly on approximate dynamic programming concepts, that were probably the most advanced at the time. And they struggled for 10, 15 years. So it's been a long time we've been hearing about this. And then finally I guess, but you don't know what's real and what's not, really, because it's such a dangerous thing to use research concepts. Nobody wants you playing, and they're working with New Jersey, New York, right? I mean, it's not like they want you flipping. But these are adaptive dynamic systems. And part of the concept Kumar had like 2-3 years ago was these are able to identify like you've got multiple kind of centers, a little bit like the rich club of the brain concept, where you've got centers in the 23 centers in the brain that are particularly rich in short, long-term connections, and they kind of help coordinate, they think, whatever any idea is worth in the brain, right? So you have these centers throughout the US, but if you lose part of your communications and your grid, you can actually infer fairly accurately for a significant period of time what that missing piece in your knowledge is, how it's operating, what state it's in, so your other controls are able to adapt to that. So he had that. A thing that just had our jaws dropping at a meeting was, this is just an organizational meeting for society. Georg Zimmerman sitting in the crowd, and they're going around asking people, what have you been doing recently? And there's all this talk about AI. And to me, it's not AI at all. It's the opposite. It's CI, computational intelligence. More specifically, the dominant monster in the room is deep learning neural networks. Nobody's heard of it, right? So they're talking to Georg, oh yeah, well, we've implemented on the border between France, Switzerland, and Germany, they have a massive electrical problem. The problem is the politics, because you are forced to consume the output of windmills and solar panels, which is about the stupidest thing you can do, right? Instead of just turning the damn things off when it doesn't make any sense. You have to pay countries all over Eastern, Western Europe to take your electricity.
Yeah.
Panic, right? Yeah. So Georg's saying, well, we finally got this system. It's up, and we're quite happy. It's working quite well. And what's the characteristic? 1,000-layer deep recurrent neural network. And you worked on that 500 kVA. Yeah. That was Siemens, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And this is Siemens, and he gave me a chart of he's the head of the neural networks research group in Siemens. And people couldn't believe it, because they're playing around with the idiot's guide to deep learning neural networks, or convolutional neural networks, and restricted Boltzmann machines, right? There aren't very many people in the world that can make a recurrent neural network really work. 1,000-layer deep one? Yeah. Like, it's just stunning. So there are things happening on the power grid that make a lot of the rest of this stuff look, wow, that's really trivial crap you guys are doing compared to the power grid. Yeah. Power grid's beautiful. Yeah. You worked on the 500 kVA. They weren't using Siemens 1,000-layer deep neural network. You don't need that for one line, right? But still.
Yeah, I think the point that you made was I think that could be where you can use the word artificial intelligence. It's a self-healing, right? It's being able to, the network should be able to automatically regulate itself, and if there's an outage here,
it's optimizing. It's optimizing and adapt.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean that's something that is being done in the communication industry to route IP packets. Right?
The power is so much more difficult to do.
Sure.
You know, if you make a big mistake, it's a really big mistake.
But the benefit is huge, right?
Yeah.
Like in the world that I talked about, right? You can't afford to have power out.
Yeah.
And so I mean, yeah, I guess if it's a 1,000-line algorithm right now, hopefully
Not a
that's-
1,000-line.
or a 1,000-layer algorithm now.
It's not, I don't look at, I mean, everybody's using the word algorithm, which makes no sense to me at all. It's not an algorithm.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, they're using it because you use the word algorithm elsewhere. That's not what anybody said for decades, so why are we using that now? Why are we calling this artificial intelligence what is essentially the opposite of AI? It's absolutely the opposite. AI was the attempt to impute human-like intelligence in machines on the basis of rational, logical, scientific-like reasoning. CI is non-rational, non-logical, non-scientific reasoning. That's why it works, and nobody's getting the message.
So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Good point.
No. But it's a fascinating area. The
Yeah.
electrical is, and communications too, but electric, big power.
Yeah, there's gonna be tons and tons of changes. I mean, like I said, our electric grid it's still as advanced or as old as it has been. It's been around for a long time. There's so much more to be done, especially on the distribution side. I mean, I think there's gonna be a lot of changes coming.
I think there's another
Yeah.
question.
I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about like how these innovations in like smart grids and smart cities, like what entities will actually develop and implement them. Because I kind of think that like all the big companies like, I don't know, utilities and oil and gas companies and like internet providers don't really have incentive to change their business models in order to make the revenue. And if I look at the companies that have made things a bit more convenient for me, I think of like Uber and Airbnb, and those companies didn't even exist 10 years ago. So yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about like whether it'll be like small startups that are actually developing these innovations, or if it'll be existing companies.
Yeah, so I mean, I think utilities didn't really need to change for the longest time, and to a certain degree, even up until now, because there was no competition, right? They had a nice regulated environment, and they had their nice territory. It was essentially monopoly. They've operated as monopolies to a certain degree in their region, and the incentive wasn't there. But that monopoly is breaking because now they have alternative sources of power with microgrid, right? They can have a rooftop, they can put a battery in the basement, and there is a choice for them to go get their power from somewhere else. And I think that's what's making the utilities rethink. I mean, they have not done anything wrong. I mean, they have been operating within a very regulated environment, trying to deliver on the objective and a scope of services that they were offered, and that's what they've done. They've done it wonderfully well. But I think in going forward and in the environment we're in now, there is competition, and that is being they are raising those questions with the regulators, with the government, that they need to be able to do things a little bit differently. And certain jurisdictions have given a little bit of that freedom. Certain utilities have set up their competitive side of the business to explore some of those initiatives. Because if they were to do that on the regulated side, it wouldn't go over very well. They wouldn't be allowed to do it. There's no recovery mechanism for them. But so they have set up their competitive side. So there's an example, NextEra, one of the utilities in Florida. They have basically under their brand, under their name, they have set up a home services portal where if you're having an issue with your furnace or you're having an issue with the electric, like a home sort of typical home issues, people are able to, they've selected some certain companies that offer those services under their umbrella, and they're offering those services to their customers because they realize that they've got a number of customers, who are their customers, and they've got a relationship, and they're basically opening up their portal under their competitive side to allow some additional non-traditional services that they hope that people will come to them because they trust the name and they trust that these are qualified people. So I'm seeing experiments like that happening with utilities on their non-competitive side, but on the regulated side, the regulations are going to change. I think it's just a matter of time. I know a lot of those conversations are happening. Pretty much every conference I go to, those same questions get raised, and they will change. It's going to take time because no government wants to bring in a change a regulation and not do it in the right way, and that causes some price fluctuation or prices to, like you were saying, grid is very complex, right? It's very interconnected, it's real time, and it's so integrated into people's quality of life that whenever there's changes, well, we know that in Ontario actually it was a big issue, right? The electricity pricing was a big issue and it changed the election. So certainly governments are very nervous to make changes, so you're going to see some small changes start to happen, but it will happen, no doubt. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just have one quick question about safety. That substation that also contains an art gallery, how do you implement safety in that setting where you're mixing high voltage with art? I mean, like if there's an art flash, I mean, it could be catastrophic.
Yeah, so I mean, so they are clearly using, or they're using GIS, and they would have fireproof and explosion-proof walls appropriately set up around the part of the building that has substation, and it's I'm pretty sure it would be underground as well to expose. So there are certain things that you can do, and in fact, substations have been around